It's World War II and the clock is ticking as Hitler's dangerous ambitions grow. You are part of a team of conspirators who must collaborate to end the brutal oppression of Nazi Germany by taking down Hitler in Black Orchestra, which was designed by Philip Dubarry and published by Tabletop Tycoon, who sponsored this video. Hi everyone, my name is Candace Harris from Board Game Geek. We have millions of people to save, so let's get down to the table to learn how to play Black Orchestra. Black Orchestra is a cooperative board game where 1 to 5 players work together as historical figures involved in the conspiracy against Hitler. To win the game, players need to assassinate Hitler by succeeding at a plot attempt. Otherwise, players can lose the game immediately if all players are in prison, if the document's located event card is drawn, or if you can't draw an event card when you're required to. On a turn, you'll take actions such as moving, collecting and delivering items, and gaining helpful conspirator cards. Then you'll draw an event card which takes you through key events of World War II. Meanwhile, the Gestapo will make routine sweeps and any players with high suspicion will be arrested and interrogated. But before we start conspiring and plotting, let's go over the setup for Black Orchestra. To begin, place the game board in the center of the table. Then place the Hitler and 5 deputy tiles on the board in their starting spaces as indicated by matching the icon on each tile to the space with the same icon on the board. Shuffle the item tiles and place one face down on each space with a black square. Next, decide which difficulty level you want to play at, easy, standard, or hard. Based on the level you chose, place the red military support cube on the appropriate value of the Hitler's military support track, 2 for easy, 3 for standard, or 4 for hard. Then take the corresponding difficulty tile and place it on top of the tracker over the area listed on the back of the difficulty tile. Next, sort the event cards by stage number into 7 face-down decks. Shuffle each deck and return the top 2 cards of each deck to the game box without revealing them. Then place the 7 event decks face down in order above their appropriate spaces on the board. Next, shuffle all of the conspirator cards and place them in a face-down stack next to the board in the designated area for the conspirator deck. Likewise, shuffle all of the interrogation cards and place them in a face-down stack next to the board in the designated area for the interrogation deck. Place all 10 dice to the side of the board within reach of all players. Then have each player choose 1 conspirator sheet, or 2 if you're playing solo, as well as a pawn and 2 cubes of the same color. Place 1 of your cubes on each of the starting levels for motivation and suspicion on your conspirator sheet, timid for motivation and medium for suspicion. Then have all players place their pawns on the train station space in Berlin. The player wearing the most black will be the first player. Now you're ready to take down Hitler. Black Orchestra is played over a series of turns until the players win or lose the game together. The only way you win the game is if you assassinate Hitler by succeeding at a plot attempt. However, there are 3 ways you can lose the game. If all players are in prison, you lose the game. If you can't draw an event card when you're required to, you lose the game. And if this Stage 7 event documents located is drawn, you lose the game. If any of these 3 conditions are met at any time, you immediately lose the game. Before I go over what you do on your turn, there are a few key concepts to cover. On your conspirator sheet, you'll be tracking your motivation and suspicion throughout the game. Your motivation measures how committed you are to the cause and affects your ability to have cards in your dossier, use your special ability, and make plot attempts. You start the game at timid motivation, and you're limited to only 2 cards in your dossier, but once you've improved to skeptical, you'll be able to hold more cards. At the next level, you can use the special ability listed to the right of that space. And then, once you're committed, you can attempt plots against Hitler as an action, which is what you need to do to win the game. Suspicion tracks how much attention you've attracted during your covert operations. The higher your suspicion, the more difficult it will be to avoid detection when attempting a plot. Also, when a Gestapo Raid event card is drawn, all conspirators at extreme suspicion are arrested. In Black Orchestra, players take turns in clockwise order, starting with the first player. On your turn, first you'll check for Hitler and deputies in your starting space and potentially suffer penalties. Then you'll take up to 3 actions, and then you'll finish your turn by drawing and resolving an event card. Let's go a little deeper into each of these steps. If you start your turn in the same space as Hitler and/or one of his 5 deputies, their intimidating presence disrupts your plans and you suffer the corresponding penalties noted on their tiles. For example, Hitler lowers your motivation by 1, Himmler raises your suspicion by 1, and Göring forces you to discard 1 item you're carrying. You'll suffer the penalties on all of the leader tiles at your location, but you can choose the order that penalties are applied when there are multiple tiles. Penalties are only suffered if any leader tiles are in your space at the start of your turn. You do not suffer a penalty if you move onto or off of a space with a leader on it. After suffering any leader penalties, you may take up to 3 actions. You may take the same action multiple times with the exception of the conspire action, which may only be taken once per turn. Let's go over each of the actions. With the move action, you can move your pawn from your current space to a connected space. Each space on the board has a number on it corresponding to an event stage. You may only move into spaces with a number equal to or less than the current stage's number. For example, you can't enter the Prague space until stage 3 or later. Spaces in Berlin are designated with a B instead of a stage number and are always accessible. All Berlin spaces are treated as being connected to one another. In order to enter or leave Berlin, you must move through the train station. If an effect specifies Berlin, this includes all Berlin spaces. Certain spaces on the board contain modifiers. When you enter a space with modifiers, you immediately apply the listed modifiers and continue your turn. Applying the modifier effects does not count as an action. You may gain the effects of a space multiple times in a turn, but you must move out of the space and then move back into it to gain the effect again. There are also fortified locations denoted by this icon. Fortified locations may be required elements for some plots, but otherwise have no game effect and may be moved into or out of freely. You can perform the reveal item action to simply flip a face down item tile in your space face up. You can perform the collect item action to take a revealed item tile in your space and add it to your conspirator sheet. Item tiles are used to help your plot attempts and lower suspicion levels by delivering them to certain cities. Items are placed in the item boxes on your conspirator sheet. You have a limit of 3 items that you can carry in a 3 to 5 player game, but you can carry 4 items when playing with 1 or 2 players. When your item slots are all filled, you can still pick up items in hopes of finding something useful, but you must immediately discard down to your item limit. In that case, you can discard one of your existing items or the new one you just picked up. Once you have items in your possession, you can perform the deliver item action to deliver items and lower you and your teammates' suspicion level. If your pawn is on a space where the space's original item has been removed and the delivery text is revealed, you may deliver an item based on the requirements specified on the delivery text. Delivered items are discarded to the item discard pile and are not put back on the delivery space. If the benefit is specified as distributed, the active player distributes the benefit among the conspirators however they choose, regardless of their location. However, if a player is in prison, they cannot receive any benefits from a delivery. With the Dossier action, you take the top card of the conspirator deck and add it to your dossier face up in front of you, observing card limits based on your motivation level and player count. Conspirator cards are either in a dossier or discarded. They are never held in hand. Similar to items, if you ever draw a card and go over your limit, immediately discard down to your limit. Conspirator cards with this symbol are illegal. Having them in your possession is powerful, but risky since they could draw the unwelcome attention of the Gestapo. Some conspirator cards are plots which you'll need to make an assassination attempt in order to win the game. Any cards with ongoing effects apply only while the card is in the dossier. Some conspirator cards are discarded after resolving their effect. If so, place any discarded cards into a face-up discard pile next to the conspirator deck. If the conspirator deck ever runs out of cards during the game, shuffle the discarded conspirator cards into a new face-down conspirator deck. If you're in the same space as another conspirator, you can take the transfer action to give one item or card in your dossier to a conspirator in your space, or they can give you one item or card from their dossier, observing item and dossier limits as usual. On your turn, you can also act and resolve one effect in your dossier or on your conspirator sheet with this arrow icon. There are some effects that have a lightning bolt icon too, but those do not require an action to resolve. The lightning bolt effects can be resolved at any time, even on another player's turn. The conspire action is the only action you can only take once during your turn. When you conspire, take up to 3 dice, spending 1 action for each die you take. Roll all of those dice and resolve the results in the following order. For each eagle rolled, you and all other conspirators in your space raise suspicion by 1. Then for each target rolled, place that die on the descent track at the top of the board. When there are 3 dice on the descent track, the active player immediately chooses to either raise one conspirator's motivation by 1 or lower Hitler's military support by 1. Then return all dice on the descent track back to the supply. Any additional overflow target results are then added to the track. Finally, total all the number results and gain that many actions this turn, plus any unspent actions that you didn't use for the conspire action. Should any of your fellow conspirators find themselves in prison, you can perform the release action to attempt to release them from prison. You must be in the Gestapo HQ space in order to take this action, and you cannot take it if you are at extreme suspicion. You'll roll 1 die, and if you rolled an eagle, you've asked too many suspicious questions, and instead of freeing your ally, you're arrested. If you rolled any other result, raise your suspicion by 1 and choose 1 arrested conspirator to release. The released conspirator moves to the Gestapo HQ at high suspicion. Once you've taken all of your actions for the turn, draw the top card from the lowest numbered event deck available and place it face up on top of the current event space. Then resolve its effects immediately. This card is the current event, and its stage number determines the current stage. If you can't draw an event card, you automatically lose the game. A new stage begins when the first card of that stage is the current event, not when the previous stage's deck runs out. Once stage 7 begins, many previously available spaces are off limits for the remainder of the game as indicated by this icon. When stage 7 begins, move Hitler, all deputies, and all conspirators to the nearest legal space. Certain events are marked as key events, and they represent major historical moments which allow the game to generally follow the flow of history. When a key event is drawn, place it face up in the current event space and resolve its effects as usual. However, when the next event card is drawn, place the key event on the key event space to the right of the board. The key event isn't considered to be the active effect anymore, but it does have an effect when certain events are drawn. If the key event is showing when an important event is drawn with this yellow bar, the drawn card is discarded without effect and the next event card is drawn in its place. If the key event isn't showing, resolve the drawn event card as usual. Key events are discarded when the next stage begins. If an effect would have you draw multiple event cards in a turn, completely resolve the first event before drawing the next. After resolving an event card, your turn is over. Then the player to your left becomes the active player and begins their turn. There are a few more rules to cover, and I'm sure you want to know how attempting a plot works, considering it's the only way you can win the game. After stage 1, the Gestapo begin to perform disruptive searches and violent raids as they try to track down the conspirators. When a Gestapo raid event card is drawn, first, conspirators at extreme suspicion are arrested. Arrested conspirators immediately discard all illegal cards in their dossiers. Then, for each illegal card in a conspirator's dossier, the corresponding player must either discard the card or keep the card and raise their suspicion by 1. Conspirators make this decision for each of their illegal cards one at a time in any order. If a conspirator reaches extreme suspicion at this point, they keep any remaining illegal cards. Finally, return all dice on the descent track to the supply. When you're arrested, you'll immediately discard all illegal cards in your dossier and move to the prison space. If you are arrested during your turn, proceed directly to the draw an event card step. The prison is not connected to any space on the board, and the only way to move into or out of the prison space is to be arrested or released. While you're in prison, you can't take actions or resolve lightning bolt effects, you can't be the target of, and are unaffected by all effects, unless the effect specifically states that you were released. Also, your special ability is considered to be blank, but you keep all of your items and non-illegal cards in your dossier. If you start your turn in prison, you'll draw an interrogation card and then draw an event card. When you draw an interrogation card, you secretly read it and you must choose one of the listed options on the card to resolve without discussion. You must make the tough choice alone without revealing or discussing any of the card options with other players. There's always the option to try and resist, which could free you without any consequences or make matters much worse. If you cannot fully apply all of the effects of an interrogation option, you must choose a different option. Once you've chosen which option to resolve, read it aloud and apply its effects, but do not reveal the other options. You choose the target for all effects, but remember, conspirators in prison, including yourself, can't be the target of an interrogation card. After resolving the interrogation card, shuffle it back into the interrogation deck unless the card says otherwise. In order to succeed in your ultimate mission, you must successfully attempt one of the plot cards from the conspirator deck. The only way to win the game is to assassinate Hitler by attempting a plot and rolling a total number of targets on the dice equal to or exceeding the current level of Hitler's military support, while rolling less eagles than allowed by the suspicion of the conspirator attempting the plot. Before you can attempt a plot, make sure you meet all of the required elements listed on the left side of the plot card. These elements deal with the locations and proximity between Hitler and the conspirator attempting the plot. The other required element always concerns motivation. You must be at committed or reckless motivation to attempt a plot. And there are even some especially dangerous plots that can only be attempted with reckless motivation. If all required elements are met, use the act action and resolve the attempt one plot in your dossier action by following 3 steps. First, build your dice pools starting with 1 die you gain by meeting the required elements to attempt a plot. In addition, you may gain additional dice or remove eagle results based on 3 types of optional elements. All plots have at least 1 item as an optional element, so you may discard any of the items listed for their associated effects. In addition to discarding your items, you can also discard items carried by other conspirators in your space with their permission. Some plots have optional elements based on your affiliation, but unlike items, you cannot use the affiliations of other conspirators in your space. And some plots have optional elements that are based on other conspirators in your space. Additionally, there are also conspirator cards and abilities that can add various benefits to the dice pool. Once the dice pool has been assembled, determine the difficulty of the plot attempt by first noting the current level of Hitler's military support and the attempting conspirator's suspicion. Additionally, check the current event and all cards and dossiers to determine if there are any modifiers to consider. When you're ready, announce the total number of targets needed to succeed at the attempt, as well as the total number of eagles that would result in the plot's failure. Before you roll the dice, you can choose to remove any amount of dice from the dice pool. Usually you'll want to use all the dice you can get, but if your suspicion is high enough, more dice could potentially be a bad thing, so choose wisely. Then roll all of the dice in the dice pool. For maximum effect, you're encouraged to stand up while making this dice roll. Then you'll evaluate the results you rolled to determine if your plot attempt was a success or a failure. First, count the number of eagles rolled. If that number equals or exceeds the amount shown below your current suspicion level, the Gestapo are alerted of your highly questionable activities and thwart your efforts at the last second, and the plot attempt fails and was detected. In that case, you'd ignore all other dice results, even if it would result in a successful plot attempt. You discard the attempted plot's card, move Hitler to the safety of the Chancellery, lower all conspirators' motivation by 1, and the conspirator who attempted the plot is arrested. Then they'd proceed directly to the draw an event card step of their turn. However, if the number of eagles rolled was lower than your suspicion level, count the number of targets rolled. If the number of targets is lower than Hitler's military support, the plot didn't go as planned, but at least it wasn't noticed. The plot attempt fails, but you keep the plot card and continue your turn as usual. But if the number of targets rolled is equal to or higher than Hitler's military support, Hitler has been assassinated and you win the game. History will remember your brave acts for generations to come. But remember, you can lose the game immediately if all conspirators are in prison, if the document's located, stage 7 event card is drawn, or if you can't draw an event card when you're required to. And that's how you play Black Orchestra. The rulebook also includes rules for a few game variants, which I'll leave you to discover on your own. Black Orchestra is a fun, challenging cooperative game with a unique theme that allows you to learn some history as you play. The gameplay keeps you on the edge of your seat and forces players to strategize and collaborate well in order to be successful. If Black Orchestra seems like a game you'd enjoy, be sure to check out its page on tabletoptycoon.com and Board Game Geek. I'm Candace Harris from Board Game Geek, and that is how you play Black Orchestra. Have a great day.